Water capitalism exists, but according to Zizek, nature does not exist. And if you don't believe me, go see his videos and his writing. Water capitalism, to me, is the grand narrative of what Zizek calls floating signifiers. So for Lovelock and Latour, human and non-human life are entangled. Yeah, it was just a fluke. There was rain, right over us, right in the mountains, and just up to the pond. And then there was no rain in Las Cruces, no rain north, south, just here. So I think it's from the drumming.
Did this just happen yesterday?
It did, about 7 o'clock last night.
And you jumped out and to take the video?
I did. I'm crazy.
So what story do you have for us today?
Oh my gosh, where do I even start? Wow.
Oh, we really appreciate this time with you.
It's really wonderful. James Lovelock says in Gaia, in one of his last interviews that he did for The Guardian, that the Earth system has always kept things cool on the Earth, fit for life. That's the essence of Gaia. It's what he calls the biosphere, but he says it's in the last 1% of its life, and we're in the last 1% of our life. So that's a pretty bold statement by James Lovelock. So I call this the auntie story. What if water capitalism is why in 2025, 5 years from now, 2/3 of the world's population will live in serious water shortages, and the other 1/3 in absolute water scarcity? I mean, they're going to have to go fetch their water for beaucoup kilometers or miles away. And what if by 2050, as the prediction is, water scarcity, absolute water scarcity, will be 50% of the world's population? So temporary water and water capitalism. The auntie story is about the place of water in the living systems of the planet, Gaia, if you prefer. One of the most intriguing causal reasons for the water shortage, I will argue, is water capitalism. So I'm kind of reversing the whole idea that water capitalism is there to be the solution of the Washington Consensus and the United Nations for the water shortage. So I'm going to argue just the opposite. So an auntie story is, as the planet heats up, it reduces available fresh water sources. They stay more in the vapor, which increases the prices of water futures, water commodities, and it makes water privatization more attractive. It exhausts the ecological ability of the stewardship of water by the water's living systems. And I believe it collapses the survival of all species. This is about water capitalism. Dow Jones Water Index has 29 water stocks. The ISE B&S Water Index of Distribution, Filtration, and Flow Technology. The S&P, Standard & Poor's 1500 Water Utilities Index, and the sub-index of 2 U.S. water companies called the American States Water and the Aqua America. Now, if that isn't a bunch of empty signifiers, I don't know what is. Standard & Poor's Global Water Index of 50 water-related businesses, the Palisades Water Index, the Bloomberg World Water Index, the MSCI World Water Index, if we go international. So water-related stocks and exchanges are trending. They're rallying. they're doing well in the marketplace. So Standard & Poor's Global Water Index of 50 water-linked companies climbed 17% in the last year. 3M and IT&T are two companies increasingly involved in water treatment. And I don't know about you, but I trust them with my life, you know. So questions about the social responsibility of water capitalism come to my mind. There's an upswing in the water futures. What I'm trying to get across here is they're trading funds in water, they being participants in water capitalism. So then there's the World Water Forum. It meets every third year. Maud Barlow, co-authored Clark, termed the World Water Fund as the new blue gold and multinational corporate theft of the world's water. Essentially, companies are siphoning off the water sources, making it commodification in a war of the haves versus the have-nots. There's some amazing rhetoric that one should analyze. Sounds so wonderful when I read it to you. The natural and spiritual cycles of water must be respected and cared for to ensure the continuity of life on Earth. In this sense, ancestral knowledge is fundamental to the culture of sustainability of the planet. The cultures and ways of life of nations, peoples, and traditional communities are a reference point of resistance in the history of humanity and must be protected because they are under threat of extinction. Well, how can they be that truthful and that duplicitous? These World Water Forums started in 1997. Claims by the World Water Forums, pretty bogus. And there's one coming up in Dakar in 2021. They haven't announced the theme yet, but I predict it would be as much an empty signifier of the reality of the planet as all the other ones. Water is treated as separate from the habitat destruction going on in water capitalism, and there's zoonotic leap of coronavirus between wild animals and then onto humankind, the increasing risk we face today. So we are the economy has displaced we the people, and both have displaced we the ecology. There's predictions by 2025 industrial water use, and that includes agriculture, will be more than 200% greater than it was in 1995. So if water capitalism was so effective, I don't think we'd be seeing these predictions. So there's a cartoon I included about water capitalism I found laying around Google somewhere. It's even though we have the best and safest tap water in the world, in Europe and the United States, other Western countries, Americans still buy upwards of 28 billion bottles of water a year. Manufacturing uses as much as 45 to 50 million barrels of oil and produces 3 tons of CO2 a year. 80% of the used bottles, the bottling industry, those plastic bottles, end up in the landfill. Mm-hmm. And on a per ounce basis, bottled water costs twice or more of what gasoline does and can be 1,000 times the cost of tap water. So, but it isn't worth it since they no doubt bottle it from some pristine, mysterious source that doesn't exist. Now we see water profits through acts of water commodification and water privatization and the World Water Forum, creating water scarcity while claiming just to do the opposite, creating water inequality, claim that they're making of water equality, and dewatering the water cycle. In other words, taking water out of the water cycle itself. That's why I think the pond is so interesting to study. So what if temporary water energy actually feeds our ponds, rivers, lakes, oceans, and is an essential part of the aliveness of water? The film I sent you, it's, I couldn't help but notice how this non-existent water is washing the land and purifying it and renewing it. Anyway, so I went back to Frederick Nietzsche. Now, water is really featured in The Will to Power. Go to the very last page. And he says, the monster of energy, without beginning and end, a play of forces and waves of forces, eternally changing, eternally flooding back with tremendous years of recurrence, with an ebb and flood. To me, that's water. The guy's talking about water. What else is he talking about? Water is nothing more than the will to power and nothing besides, and water capitalism is nothing more than another will to power. You'll see in the image before you, water capitalism's moral compass. And I'm going to say that moral compass has gotten tilted away from the truth. And what we've got, instead of water sanitation, we got increased industrial pollution of our water sources, the nexus of energy, ag, and water to your homes, tap, is 94% of the siphoning of the water supply. So that leaves 6% for everything else, and I'm sorry, it's not enough. With climate change, we're running into more water scarcity, which increases the profitability of commodification and privatization. The lack of sanitation increases the profitability. Poor and non-white paying 5 to 10 times per liter for water than wealthy people increases the gap between rich and poor and the commodification, privatization, the profits. So the disparity in distribution actually works to the advantage of water capitalism. Wow. So the compass is tilted, means it doesn't point north to truth anymore. The risks are great to the ocean, river, lakes, aquifers, pollution by C8, Teflon, fertilizer, pesticides, nanoparticles. 80% of untreated wastewater, the flushing of meds down the toilet. You've got to understand that this goes into the water cycle, the eternal recurrence, as Nietzsche calls it, and you keep circulating that mess. And you're not really pulling that material out of the water cycle. Increased consumption in the last 4 decades, worldwide water use doubled to more than 1,700 liters per person per day. So this is why water capitalism is an extremely lucrative invention and investment. There's no planet B to go and get the water from. Every year, millions of people die from a lack of clean, fresh water. The Western capitalism turns away from the water scarcity crisis that it's creating. 3 billion people lack hand washing facilities during the coronavirus epidemic. 2.2 billion people lack access to safe drinking water in the home. 1.8 billion people are drinking water that is locally contaminated. 4.5 billion people globally have no toilet in the home. 2 billion people live in high water stress places, meaning they're going to have to walk to get their water or drive. 2 billion people live in that situation. There's 1 child that dies every 8 seconds during the time I'm talking. So water capitalism, I believe, is not really helping sanitation. It claims it is, but if you look at 2.5 billion people, 1.2 of which defecate outdoors, and 40% of those defecating outdoors are defecating in your food sources and the fields where crops are grown. So local people lack the political clout to change that, and they lack in community involvement. And that causes about 50% of the water projects that the United Nations and the water companies are touting to fail. 80% of the wastewater from humankind still flows into ecosystems without any treatment, without any other second uses. It just flows. How to turn water into the most important commodity on planet Earth. You can find essential guides to water trading and water investment all over the web. The water marketplace investments are going up. They have really good charts about, okay, there's 97% of the water is salt water. So that leaves you 3%. 2% of that is unavailable in the ice pack. That leaves 1% readily available fresh water. Therefore, businesses are seeking investments in water profits for the reliable delivery and available fresh water control as a precious commodity. Are you adding water to your investment portfolio? Good investment, you know. Fresh water is increasingly scarce, so that's what's happening. People need to get a better picture of what's happening trend-wise as we move from 1900 to 2000 to 2020. So the planet's moving towards greater instability. That's what Lovelock and our friend Bruno Latour claims. The Dow Jones U.S. Water Index is going up. You know, all of these statistics, the Bloomberg World Water Index, going up. There's more than 60,000 chemicals that go into the water system, and only 91 are regulated in the safe. The world's water cycle is tainted forevermore. So the pollutants go in, they're not coming out. So there's a kind of a bell curve here of 3 peaks of water. And we're participating in the 3rd peak ecological system collapse. There's a downward spiral, water extracted for profit, water trading for water commodity indexes, water supply systems privatized, so municipalities don't control them anymore, increased price of water to consumers. That's been, all the studies show when you do that, water prices go up to consumers. Water is deprivatized long enough to fix the failing water infrastructure leaks. You got to fix the pipes, and then it gets privatized again. So there's this cycle going on. Water for production and consumption increases to meet greater water demand. So water demand is doubling, tripling, quadrupling. You're not really stabilizing this situation of water scarcity and water inequality. So we're stuck in a water capitalism system, more concerned about future trading of water for profits than about the collapse of the entire hydrological system. I hear Julia say all the time, "We are water. We are water." So how can you disembody that? To say water is a resource or a natural resource is kind of ridiculous. A water stewardship, if you look at indigenous ways of knowing, have a much gentler footprint on the planet. Nature and human are inseparable, intertwined. They have a holistic, embodied consciousness in place, with the place of water, water in placement, water aliveness, reverence for water, spiritual water. So that new moral compass for water, stewardship, is something I've included here for you. Water reverence, emplaced view of water. Water is seasonal, embodied water consciousness. Water is aliveness, a holistic view of nature, balanced water consumption between humans and nature. You know, I don't know how you could say water's not alive. when you see the film. Yeah, I feel pretty strongly about this video, you know. The whole world is in favor of water capitalism, and nobody is going to Hyde Park and getting on a soapbox and saying, hey, what if water capitalism is doing just the opposite of everything it says it's doing, you know? Then what would that mean to life on the planet? You know, Mother Nature, I don't know if Nietzsche's right, it's a monster, but she's got some force to her, you know, she's got some power. And Nietzsche says it's just forces of energy, like quantum forces of energy that are very dynamic. I planted some seeds for the trees. And I was thinking they were never gonna sprout, but they sprouted, and I planted another. That's pretty exciting. If I can actually start to grow little trees and I can go plant them. I think these are the hackberry trees.